Back in session, Mr. Dean, you indicated that you needed a proffer from the witness. The witness on the stand is Mr. Pagliari, Deputy or Sergeant Pagliari. So what is it that you want to do? You want to proffer something from him, or you want to just proffer it to the court for admissibility?
I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
So I think the easiest way for me to explain it is that yesterday the sergeant was asked, after he was played those clips from November, he was asked questions by the prosecutor about what appeared to be inconsistencies. And it left the impression in the jury's mind that Mr. Toledo may have been saying things for the first time in November. There are several other statements that were given during this week period in which Mr. Toledo was being interviewed. And for instance, yesterday the sergeant was asked about if this was the first time he had heard Mr. Toledo say that his wife swore on her kids. But the problem is that he did say it. He said it way before that, but he said it to people whose statements haven't been introduced in here. And so I can proffer it now, or I can bring those people tomorrow and deal with their statements. We weren't anticipating doing that, but I wanted to tell the court that we have statements that contradict what he said.
Well, the way I view it is as follows. The question that was asked yesterday was that the first time that, or did he ever tell you, him, X statement?
That wasn't the question as I remember it. The question as I remember it was, is this the first time you heard if he did that or not? And so that's the way I remember it. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But it left a distinct impression that it had never been said.
Well, I think you can cross-examine him on that.
Well, the way I'm going to be doing that is with reference to other statements. And so I thought that it might be better to do that now, and that way there wouldn't be any confusion in front of the jury.
Very well. Let's do it quickly because the jurors are waiting.
I understand. Sergeant Pagliari, do you remember being asked the question concerning whether or not Mr. Toledo had ever told you that he had, or that you were aware of the fact that he had ever sworn, or that his wife had ever sworn on her kids?
Yes, sir.
And your answer was no, you weren't?
Yes, sir.
No, you weren't aware of it, or no, he'd never said it?
He never said it to me, sir.
He never said it to you. That wasn't my question. No, you weren't aware of it, or no, he never said it?
You asked me if he said it to me, or
no,
if I'm aware.
Are you aware of it that he said it?
I'm not aware of that, sir.
So you're not aware of it that he said in the interview on 10/28, were you there when Ann McMillan was there?
I was in and out of, I was at operations where that interview took place.
Yes.
Did I specifically watch every minute of what Ann McMillan had interviewed Louis Toledo about, sir? No, I did not.
Okay, so you're not disputing that he said, she's like, no, I swear, I said, swear to me on everything you love, which is your kids, that you haven't slept with anybody else, and she goes, I swear on my kids. You're not aware he said that?
Again, if I wasn't in the room, perhaps, I don't know, sir.
There was a time when he was taken to a cemetery. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Were you there then?
I was there, yes, sir.
Were you there when he had the opportunity to speak with her dad?
Yes, sir, I was there.
Did you hear him tell her dad that I told her to swear to God and to the kids that she didn't go to bed with anyone, and she swore to me, and then I played her the messages and she started to shake and cry? Do you remember him saying that?
No, sir.
That would have been in your presence, though?
No, sir, because in context of what you're talking about, specifically at the cemetery, I was a perimeter unit for security reasons. So I was far away. from Louis
I
Toledo.
misunderstood you. I thought you said you were there when.
I wasn't, but I wasn't in earshot of what you're
Okay.
talking about, sir.
All right. And then I believe you were asked some questions about whether or not they were reconciling. Do you remember that? Like the ring was she was wearing a ring, and I believe the prosecutor asked you, how could he do that with what was planned for later in the day? Do you remember that question?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember, again, that he said to Ann McMillan, look, I'm wearing my ring. You know things are going, she said, look, I'm wearing my ring. You know things are going good for us now, and I really like the way things are going with us, and I really want to keep it that way. You know, I really want to continue to do things the way we've been doing them. I just really like the way things are going. Do you remember him saying that?
If it was on the 28th, again, sir, I was in the building, but I don't recall specifically hearing that.
Do you remember were you present for any of the interviews he had with Kelly Hill?
No, sir, I was not.
Do you dispute that he said to Kelly Hill, I said, could you swear to me when you went to Alabama you didn't sleep with anybody? She said, I swear to you, I swear to you. I said, will you swear on your kids that you love me? And she said, yeah, I swear on my kids. You're not aware that he said that to anybody?
No, sir.
Did they just not tell you?
A lot of working parts and pieces for this, sir. A lot of different people interviewed Mr. Toledo. I'm not aware of everything specifically that Toledo would have told other investigators.
Have you reviewed other people's statements?
Not my recollection, not right now.
All right. Then he also said to Kelly Hill, well, I went upstairs and I asked her. She goes, hey, you're doing what you are doing. I said, I'm on break. I said, let me ask you a question. And she said, what? And I said, can you look at me in the eye and swear to me, because that morning it's crazy. I don't know, it's weird, because that morning she comes back, she comes to the bathroom, and she goes, look, I'm wearing my ring again. And I said, why are you wearing your ring again? And she said, because you're doing everything I didn't think that you were going to do. You're not aware that he said that to Kelly Hill on the 28th of October?
Could you tell me where this allegedly took place?
Where Kelly Hill interviewed him. I suppose that might have been in the hospital.
Sir, I wasn't at the hospital. I never went to the hospital. So I would not be present when he told that to her.
Okay. So are you aware that Kelly Hill made a statement?
That Kelly Hill interviewed Louis Toledo? Yes, sir.
Okay. You did confirm that you knew about the pastor, right?
The pastor.
That they were seeing the pastor, or that they were trying to work on what their problems were with the pastor?
Yes, sir. I think that he talked to me about that.
Are you aware that he told her dad on the 29th, we talk about going to a pastor and go to his house and talk to him, and we wanted to get baptized again without anyone knowing? Do you remember? You wouldn't know that.
No, sir. I don't know anything about that.
That's the proffer.
All right.
I tend to ask those questions to him, and
I don't see a problem with it.
okay.
Okay. We're ready for the jury? Actually, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Give me 1 second. All right, thank you. You may be seated. Mr. Dean, you ready for cross-examination? You may proceed.
Court, good morning, everybody.
Orders, please.
Judge, I just want to remind the court that my cross-examination is going to be about all the stuff that he did, not just yesterday.
That's correct. I think for the sake of brevity, we reserve the cross-examination for all the topics that the witness has testified to, and that's what's happening now.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I just want to talk to you first about the statement that was October 23rd, which was the first one that we played in court. You were here for that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So on the 23rd, Mr. Toledo had been brought into you because he was under arrest for the incident in Lake Mary. Is that correct?
He was brought to me to be interviewed for a missing persons investigation.
Because he was in the jail because he was arrested for the incident in Lake Mary. Is that correct?
I picked him up from the jail, yes, sir.
Okay. Do you understand my question?
You're asking me if I talked to him because he was arrested.
For Lake Mary. He wasn't arrested for you.
No, sir. I talked to him because it was a missing persons investigation for me. He happened to be at the jail, arrested on something else.
The incident that occurred in Lake Mary.
Yes, sir.
You even address it at the beginning of the statement, don't you?
Yes, sir.
You're not here for that. You're here for what you were there for.
Yes, sir.
Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you begin talking to him about a missing persons case, as you put it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
At the time you started talking to him, what do you know about it?
Say again, sir?
At the time you started talking to him on the 23rd of October, what do you know about the missing persons case?
That Yesenia and her children were missing and that no one had heard from them.
And that's all you know, right?
And that her vehicle had been found in Lake Mary.
Okay, so you knew that at the very beginning,
Yes, sir.
that her vehicle had been found in Lake Mary.
Yes, sir.
Okay? So when you start talking to him about what was going on, and he started telling you a story, is that you already, did you make any conclusions about the story he was telling you?
No, sir.
So you're hearing him out.
I'm hearing him out.
You ask him about, well, I'm not sure you ask him, but he tells you how he met his wife, right?
Yes, sir.
You tell him you're not talking to him about Lake Mary, but you really do talk to him about Lake Mary, don't you?
At some point, yes, sir.
So you go all into that, right?
I don't know if I go all into it.
Okay. You knew what happened there the day before, right?
Yes, sir. He told me.
So he told you and you asked him questions about it, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you did that. And then he started getting into what happened the evening of the 22nd.
Yes,
Did
sir.
he?
Yes, sir.
All right. So let's start with, I believe you said yesterday, and if I'm wrong, you correct me, okay?
Yes, sir.
I believe you said yesterday that Mr. Toledo's story, as you understood it, went from the morning to that night, and that was consistent for you.
Yes, sir.
And that after whatever happened, then it wasn't consistent for you.
That is correct.
Okay. So in the first interview, he spends a lot of time on what happened on the 22nd, doesn't he?
Yes, sir.
So you know he went to the place of business in Lake Mary.
Yes, sir.
You know why he went there.
Yes, sir.
You know that there's a tracking system on her phone because he told you.
Yes, sir.
He didn't even hide that, right? He
No,
just
sir.
came right out and said it.
Yes, sir.
That surprised you, right? You didn't
That-
know there was a tracking system on her phone, did you?
I didn't know anything about Luis Toledo and Yesenia Suarez before the 22nd, so it was news to me.
So he volunteered all that. In fact, he was going to pull it up for you if he could do that, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, when you heard that, you asked him questions about that. We all saw all of that, right?
Yes, sir.
He told you she was having an affair, right?
Yes, sir.
He told you how he knew.
Yes, sir.
He told you that he talked to her about that, did he not?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember when he said he talked to her the first time?
The confrontation, I think he talked to her in Lake Mary before, he made 2 trips to her business.
Okay.
The first trip is when he asked her about the affair and showed her the phone.
And then the second time he came back, right?
He came back later on, sir. Yeah, during his lunch break is what he said.
Okay. And in between, he had talked to Mr. Dredden, right?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Dredden denied it.
That's my
According to
knowledge.
Lewis.
Yes, sir.
And, okay, so Mr. Dredden denied it. Then he came back, isn't that right?
Mr. Toledo
Yeah.
came back to Yesenia's place of business. Yes, sir.
So he was there. They had another confrontation.
Yes, sir.
That involved Mr. Dredden.
Yes, sir.
Then he left again.
Then he went back to work. Yes, sir. Mr. Toledo.
So he left again. And then at some point, he makes contact with Ms. Suarez. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Then he makes contact with Ms. Suarez's mother. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So they talked on the phone, and everybody decided to go to her mother's house to talk this out. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So far, so good, right?
So far, so good.
All right. Now, he goes to that house, her mother's house, and he tells you what they talk about.
Yes, sir.
He tells you that they're kind of alternating back and forth between arguing and resolving what they're going to do next, right?
Yes, sir.
He tells you that his wife's suspicion about his phone, she has a suspicion about his phone. She doesn't want to be recorded. He doesn't record her.
That is correct.
All right. They're there for a little while, and they're resolving how they're going to divide up property, what they're going to do next, right?
Yes, sir.
He gets some food, right?
Yes, his mother-in-law made him a plate of food, and he left.
And then he left.
Yes, sir.
Later on that evening, his wife, I don't want to get the names mixed up, so his wife goes home.
Yes, sir.
With the kids.
Yes, sir.
So far, so good for you, right?
So far, so good.
There was some testimony, I think, yesterday that started to indicate that there were some issues with Mr. Toledo's cell phone. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
I can't remember if that was you or if it was this detective. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Mr. Toledo's cell phone was not operating. Do you know that? Did you say that?
Did I say it?
That might not have been you. Did you say that?
I didn't introduce anything about his cell phone being operational.
Okay, so you wouldn't have known that anyway, right?
No, sir.
All right, so let's stay on the October 23rd statement. At that point, Mr. Toledo tells you they're at home. Everybody's at home at some point, right?
Yes, sir.
When they're at home, they are arguing, right?
Yes, sir.
They're arguing about what happened that day and the affair, right?
About their marriage. Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. At some point, he says he leaves. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
He goes to a cemetery.
Yes, sir.
Is this where you dispute? Do you dispute that he went to the cemetery?
No, sir.
So you think he did go to the cemetery?
At this point, he says he went to a cemetery. I got no reason to believe that he did not.
At this point, meaning on the tape or right where we are right now?
No, during the interview, the 23rd.
Okay. What about right now? Is this where you start to say his story breaks down?
No, sir. Inconsistencies in the story is where I say it breaks down.
All right. So you don't have any reason to dispute that he went to the cemetery?
On the 23rd of October, during the interview, real time?
Right.
Real time, October 23rd, he says he went to a cemetery. I've got no reason to believe that he did not go to a cemetery.
All right. Today, do you dispute that he went to the cemetery?
No, sir.
Okay, so you still don't have a problem with the consistency of his story, him going to the cemetery? Right now?
Yes, sir.
Based on what the whole thing has been over all this time, right now as you sit in front of the jury, because I don't want you to be confused,
Sure.
You don't have any problem with the consistency of his story saying he went to the cemetery?
Got no reason to believe he didn't go to a cemetery.
Okay. Do you have any reason to believe he didn't go when he said he did?
No, sir.
All right. At some point, he comes back from the
Yes, sir.
cemetery. He tells you on the recording that he got back. Do you remember what time?
He said 3. One time I think he said maybe 1-ish, 2-ish.
So in the early morning hours, he comes back.
Early morning hours, yes, sir.
You know now there was a phone call between his wife and Kevin Dredden. You know that?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what time that was?
I want to say, I think it was a 14-minute conversation. So 12:45-ish. I think it ended at 1:03 a.m. somewhere.
So in the 1 o'clock hour, somewhere in there, like 12 to 1-ish, yes?
Yeah, 12:30 to 1-ish. Yes, sir. Somewhere in that time frame.
So you know that call was made, and Mr. Toledo said in one at one point he got back around 1. Is that right?
No, I'm saying that one of his versions of events is that he left for the cemetery, or came back. Yes, sir. Around 1-ish, 2-ish, 3-ish, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there, right?
Yes, sir.
But you know that call was made.
Yes, sir.
Everybody knows that call was made.
Yes, sir. Louis Toledo said he was witness to the call.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you.
Toledo was witness to the call.
Yeah, so that would put him there in the 1 o'clock hour, right? Or the 12 to 1 hour.
I'd put him at Covent, yeah, at his home, in the 12:30 to 1 hour. Yes, sir.
Okay, so you know when he got back.
Got back?
Well, you know, you don't dispute that he went to the cemetery, right?
No, sir.
You know when the call was made.
Yes, sir.
So you know when he got back from the cemetery, right? He had to be back to be at the call, right? Or you don't think he left yet?
I don't think he left yet. No, sir. I think
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I got you. So you think he was still there up until midnight, that call was made, and then he left?
I know he was there. He said he was there.
Okay.
Until at least 1 a.m. Yes, sir.
All right, so that's when he left, to go to the cemetery.
Yes, sir.
All right. So he goes to the cemetery and he comes back. So if he leaves at 1, he couldn't got back at 1, right?
No, sir.
So if he leaves at 1, he gets back, what you said, 2-ish or 3? Did you say that?
Oh, that's what he said, sir.
You think he said that?
I think it's on the recording, sir.
On the 23rd?
Somewhere in our interviews.
Okay. So he gets back, let's stick with the 23rd just so I don't get confused. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, so if he gets back, according to the 23rd, he gets back around 3, isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Tell me what happened next, as you remember the recording.
As I remember the recording, is that he said he got back around 3. He saw his neighbor pull up. He said that he fell asleep in his car in the driveway. He said that he recalls it being hot and that it was daylight. He woke up. He went inside. No one was home. He was upset that...
No one was home?
No, sir. He was upset that his wife didn't wake him up because he was going to be late for work. You want to continue, or?
No, he described certain things that he saw in the house, and then he goes to work, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's stick with when he got there, though, around 3 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
He says he saw his neighbor, Tyshawn, is that right?
Yes, sir. I asked him about Tyshawn.
Did he say what Tyshawn was doing on the 23rd?
He said he pulled up.
Okay. Are you aware of a call that was made at 3 o'clock by Tyshawn? You might not be, I'm just asking.
I don't think I ever asked him about a call like that. I'm not sure, sir.
Are you aware of it now?
That you're telling me?
Yeah.
If you're telling me that it occurred.
Were you ever aware of it in the course of the investigation over these years?
Yes, sir.
That Tyshawn made a call at 3 o'clock?
Yes, sir. I think so.
So you know he made a call, right?
Yes, sir.
He made a call at 3 o'clock, and then Mr. Toledo says he sees him outside.
On the 23rd or a subsequent interview?
23rd. I'm sticking with the 23rd right now. So Mr. Toledo says he saw Tyshawn outside, right?
On the 23rd, if I could recall, he said he saw Tyshawn 2 times. He saw, definitively, he saw him at 9 p.m. on the 22nd, and then he saw him at 1 a.m. on the 23rd.
1 a.m.
1 a.m. Yes, sir.
Not 3 a.m.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. You said he saw him at 1, and then he didn't see him again, right?
Yes, sir.
And then he fell asleep in his car at 3.
Yes, sir.
Later on the 24th, he changed it that he saw him, right?
Yes, sir.
That's when he changed it, right?
Yes, sir.
He saw him outside on the 24th, right?
He said that he pulled up in the driveway. His neighbor pulled up, and then on the 24th, he said he came out of the house. Then he said with a flashlight, and then he also said that one time he came out, Mr. Biggs came out with him. So
Can both things be true?
it's possible.
Okay. So on the 23rd, he's giving you this story up until the next morning. Where in there, from the morning of the 22nd to the morning of the 23rd, where in there is that not consistent for you?
His story on the 23rd, where is it not consistent?
Well, you said yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, that at a certain point his story began to break down. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Where in that version of the story did it break down?
Subsequent interviews.
Okay, but where in that part of the story did it break down? That specific story, where did it break down for you?
When I found out that I asked him about the car, I asked Toledo, if somebody told me that they saw you driving your wife's car, what is your answer? And he said, quote, impossible. So
I remember that.
To me, that would be a breakdown of the story.
Okay, but maybe I'm not communicating with you. I think I am, but I'm going to try again, okay? So he leaves at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, sir.
On the 23rd, that's the statement. He leaves at around 1, right?
Yes, sir.
He goes to the cemetery.
Yes, sir.
You're okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
What's the first thing you're not okay with?
When I asked him about the fact that somebody saw him driving his wife's car on the 24th, and he says, that's impossible.
Okay. So you don't have a problem with him saying that he got back at whatever time he said. What time did he say on the 23rd? 3?
Yes, sir.
So he got back at 3. You don't have a problem with that?
No, sir.
You don't have a problem with him saying he fell asleep in his car?
No, sir.
You don't have a problem with him saying that he didn't wake up till the morning?
No, sir.
You find that to be consistent with the things he said?
I find that to be consistent, yes, sir.
With everything he said in subsequent interviews, you find that to be consistent so far?
Subsequent interviews, he changes his story. He doesn't say that he fell asleep in his car, but if we're sticking to just the 23rd.
I'm not. I'm asking you as clearly as I know how. Where does this story break down? Yesterday you were talking about everything. Right now I'm starting with the 23rd.
Yes, sir.
And I want to know where it began to break down for you in that version of the story. Okay?
Yes, sir. The story breaks down, again, when I ask him about his wife's car. Did he drive his wife's car?
All right, but that didn't happen until, according to your version, that didn't happen until after 6 in the morning. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir. But you said that, where did the inconsistencies begin? For you on the 23rd, your interview on the 23rd, that was your question. My understanding of your question. And my answer to your question was that on the 23rd, his inconsistencies began to show when I asked him about his wife's car, and he said it was impossible.
So that's the first time you thought he might not be telling you the truth?
Yes, sir. That's an inconsistency.
All right. So even though he said to you, even though you knew that fact, that they'd found his car someplace, did you know how the car got in there at the very beginning of the interview?
I don't know if I knew the specifics. I just knew that the car had been located in Lake Mary.
So you knew it had been located, but you didn't know how it got there?
Tyshawn Jackson, I think, provided information to others, but I didn't talk to Tyshawn. So the specifics, I did not know, sir.
Did you know that it had been moved the way it was described by Tyshawn Jackson?
Again, I didn't know the details.
At the beginning, you didn't know that?
On the 23rd, no, sir.
So for you on the 23rd, that's where I understand it. So for you on the 23rd, that's where the first breakdown was, is that he acted like he didn't know where the car was.
Yes, sir.
But you didn't know the details of that, so you didn't know if he knew how it got there or not, right? You just knew that they'd found the car.
Yes, sir.
On the 23rd, when you were asking him questions, later on, he says impossible, and then later on you show him a picture of a knife. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Why did you show him that?
Because the knife was found close to his house.
That knife hasn't been connected to anything, has it?
Well, the people were missing. His wife and his kids were missing. I believe before I asked him about the knife, I asked him if he moved his wife's car, or he knew anything about his wife's car, and he said impossible. So if he was inconsistent on moving his wife's car, is it possible that he's inconsistent on the knife?
So that's why you're asking him about it on the 23rd, right?
Well, yes, sir.
But it's 4 years later, the whole case is done. That knife hasn't been tied to anything, has it?
Not that I know, sir.
All right. But at the time, you didn't know, so you're asking him.
Yes, sir.
Would you consider his attitude at that time on the 23rd to be cooperative with you?
Yes, sir.
I mean, he was very forthcoming, right?
Yes, sir.
He talked a lot, right?
He likes to talk.
Let's go to the 24th now, okay?
Yes, sir.
You saw him early in the morning on the 24th, or you tried to, right? At the
Yes, sir.
jail?
I saw him.
Okay, but that was very brief and nothing happened, right?
Yes, sir.
Then you came back that morning, and that's what the recording was that we saw in court, right?
On the 24th, yes, sir.
Yes. And in that recording, you read him his Miranda warnings for the first time, right?
That is correct.
And in that recording, you told him, you said to him, if you want a lawyer, questioning will stop, right?
Yes, sir. That's part of the rights.
So that's what you said, right?
If it was verbatim,
Do you want me to read it to you verbatim? Or you just agree with me that's what you said?
you're saying that, did I ask him that during the reading of the constitutional rights? It's one of the lines. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So when you ask him if he'll talk to you, he then says, can you get me one so I can run it by him? He meant a lawyer, right?
Well, before that, yes, sir. But before that, he said something to preface it, which I think is just as important as what he said afterward.
He said he was going to talk to you.
Yes, sir. Can I refer back to
Sure.
my notes? Okay.
Yes.
Can I refer back to the transcript?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you looking at your notes or the transcript?
These are my notes that I wrote reference to the transcript page numbers,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yeah. It's page 4.
I've got page 5 on October 24th.
Okay.
Okay, page 5, October 24th transcript starts with line 22. You see it, sir?
I'm not looking at the same one. Just start reading.
Oh, sir. Says, Louis Toledo, I do want to talk to you. I do want to continue to talk to you. I'm going to tell you everything. I said, okay. And then he says, he questions me and says, is there any way that you can get one down here just so I can run it down to him first?
And you tell him no.
Yes, sir. Sergeant Sheps answered his question.
No.
Said that we couldn't do that. And if I may,
Well, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Right before that on page 4,
on page,
the exact question is, if at any time, page 4,
yes, sir.
line 40. Yes? You got it?
Yes, go ahead.
If at any time you wish to stop talking or have an attorney present, all questioning will be stopped at your request. If at any time, right?
Yes, sir.
You say, do you understand? And he says, yes. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Then you go to the next part of the rights thing where you give him his rights. You finish doing that, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's when he says, I'll tell you. But then he says, is there any way that you can get one down here just so I can run it down to him first?
Yes, sir.
You know he meant a lawyer.
Yes, sir.
And you told him no.
Sergeant Sheps said no, but again, in the context of that, he also said, Sergeant Sheps gave Louis the option. So if you want to talk to us and continue to help us find them, that's your option. Okay?
Well, read the whole thing. Listen, we can't do that. And
Okay.
2, we don't have time for that.
Yes, sir.
Our priority right now is this. He told him no.
But you want to continue to read the transcript?
And it says, so if you want to talk to us and continue, but he did ask for a lawyer, didn't he?
Yes, sir. But continuing, if I may. So if you want to talk to us and continue to help us find them, that's your option. Okay, Sergeant Sheps asked him that. But we need to start looking at the bigger picture here because the children and his wife are still missing. I think you already know what position you're in right now. So if you wish to continue, we will continue. Okay? Because this is our priority. When I ask him again.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Let me ask you questions.
Sure.
You didn't say that part first, or he didn't say that part first. He said no. We can't do that. He told him no first and then said all of that, right?
Yes, sir. He answered his question.
Okay. On the 24th, right after that exchange.
Yes, sir.
You remember what happens next, right? He says, listen, 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 I'm going to tell you everything. I know you're not here to help me, all that stuff. Remember that?
Sure, I can read that. You want to read that one?
Don't need it read. I'm just asking you questions.
Okay, yeah, and he also said that he knew that they're going to use it against me.
Right.
Yes, sir.
He said that.
He was aware. Yes, sir.
Okay, so he said that. Listen, listen, listen. And then he just sort of lets it out, right?
Yes, sir.
He hadn't acted like that before, had he? Where he just sort of let it out like that.
Showed emotion?
Yeah, like that.
He had no emotion on the 23rd.
I mean, he was sobbing, right?
He was crying.
You don't call that sobbing?
Our definitions of crying could be different, sir, but yeah, he was emotional. He was crying.
Would you say he was very emotional?
Or, yeah. I'd say he's emotional. Yeah, again.
Well, it speaks for itself. I'm just interested in how you characterize it.
Sure.
Okay. Now, this version of the story is different, right?
Yes, sir.
Just tell me where you think on the 24th it starts to be different from the 23rd.
Right away, when he says that he killed his wife
Okay?
and that his children are dead.
Okay? And then he goes into the long version of how that happened, right?
Yes, sir.
Once he starts the long version of how that happened, because you spent a lot of time with him,
Yes, sir.
naturally.
Yes, sir.
So once he goes into the long version of how that happened, where is it? Well, let me ask you a better question. Once he starts the long version of how that happened on the 24th, do you have any reason to disagree with the events that occurred from the morning of the 22nd until they were home that night?
No, sir.
So that's all still the same?
That's all still the same.
Okay. And then at some point in that evening, you would say you start to find inconsistencies with the 23rd. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so at what point in the interview of the 24th, other than what you said, do you start to find inconsistencies with what he said about that night, about the night of the 22nd?
Right after when he goes into the cleanup, okay, he being Toledo, he says that once they forgot the mat, Toledo says, I told Tyshawn we had to go turn around because I forgot the mat, and they're going to be able to trace, paraphrasing, be able to trace something on that trunk mat. I think it's a few pages later on in the transcript, or a few minutes down the road, Toledo says that it was Tyshawn that says we need to go back and get the mat.
Okay, so that's the first time you think there was an inconsistency from the story on the 23rd?
That's what sticks out right now to me.
That's what sticks out to you? Okay, so when you are talking out what happened, I mean, he's just letting it out, right? I mean, it's coming out, right?
Yes, sir.
That's when at some point in that discourse is when he says to you that he got home around 3,
Yes, sir.
that he saw Mr. Jackson in his yard, or that he saw him come out with a dog.
I'm not sure if it was he said that the neighbor pulled up. I'd have to refer back to my notes for that version.
However you say it, he saw Mr. Jackson outside, however he got there.
He sees Mr. Jackson. Yes, sir.
Okay, and they were outside, right?
Either he was pulling up or Jackson was coming out of the house. Again, I have to
Okay.
refer to my notes.
All right, so however that happened, whatever's on there's on there.
Yes, sir.
And so that's when they had a brief conversation and Mr. Toledo invited Mr. Jackson in. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
He invited him in to play video games. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now follow me here, okay?
Okay.
Yesterday, were you asked about the PlayStation? Was that you?
And I don't recall, sir. A PlayStation?
Yeah. Were you aware they played video games, or he said they played video games? You're
In his
aware?
interview on the 24th, he says that was the intention, was that they were going to play PS3.
Okay. You don't dispute that?
No, sir.
So at this point on the 24th, you believe Tyshawn Jackson went into that house and played video games?
At that portion of the interview on the 24th, when he's giving me all of his story,
Yes.
yeah, I've got no reason to believe that Tyshawn Jackson didn't go in that house.
All right, now we're sitting here today. Do you believe that Tyshawn Jackson went into his house and played video games?
No, sir.
You don't believe that?
No, sir.
You don't believe that because Tyshawn Jackson told you no?
I don't believe that because the investigation doesn't show that he went into the house.
All right. So Mr. Toledo said that he did go in the house.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
correct?
That's correct.
All right. And I just need to approach the bench very briefly. So the evidence of your investigation doesn't indicate that Mr. Jackson went into the house. Did you say that?
Yes, sir.
All right. What evidence is there that says he didn't go in the house, that he didn't go in the house? Because Mr. Toledo says he did go in.
During my interviews with Toledo, he had mentioned, I asked him some places, how could I find Tyshawn being in the house? I then relayed some of those things that Mr. Toledo had said that Tyshawn had touched or come in contact with to the crime scene folks, and to the best of my knowledge, all these things that Toledo said that may have Tyshawn Jackson evidence did not have Tyshawn Jackson evidence.
You know the house was cleaned.
I know the house was, yes, sir.
So you made a decision that Mr. Jackson was not in the house based on the fact that there was no evidence of him being in the house. Is that what you just said?
Yes, sir.
But the place was clean.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you decided that, there wasn't any evidence, like fingerprint evidence, on a lot of the stuff that was there. Isn't that right?
Sir, I don't know.
You don't know.
No, I would.
All right. Now, in the 24th statement, we're still talking about that.
Yes, sir.
At this point, he says that Mr. Jackson killed his kids. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
He has said that all the way through, hasn't he?
Yes, sir.
He's never wavered from that, has he?
No, sir.
He has said all the way through that he didn't know where the bodies were. Hasn't he said that?
Yes, sir.
All the way through.
Yes, sir.
He's never wavered on that.
No, sir.
On the night of on the statement of the 24th, he's talking to you about what he says actually happened. He tells you that he tells you what happened between him and his wife. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
He tells you that he struck her. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
He tells you the result of that. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
He tells you that Mr. Jackson was in the house. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that Mr. Jackson took the kids into a different room. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
He tells you that he hears thumps. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
He tells you eventually he goes in and sees that Mr. Jackson is the one that killed his kids. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
He tells you that, well, he tells you where those children are at that time, right?
Yes, sir.
Where does he say they are?
He said that his boy was in the tub and his daughter was on the floor.
Where in the house was she on the floor?
The bathroom.
She was on the floor in the bathroom. So
Yes, sir.
both children were in the same room.
Yes, sir.
Does he tell you that he didn't know that was going to happen?
Did he tell me that he didn't know it was going to happen?
He didn't know that Mr. Jackson was going to kill his kids? Told you that, right?
Yeah, he said he didn't. That was not part of the plan.
He told you that upset him?
Yes, sir.
He said he pinned him against a wall, isn't that correct?
He said he grabbed Jackson and threw him against the doorknob.
Door of the wall?
Yes,
the
sir.
door?
Bathroom door.
Okay.
Against maybe the doorknob.
So he hit the door.
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, you indicated that there were parts of that story you didn't believe.
I said they were inconsistent.
Tell me how they're inconsistent.
Well, his version on the 24th was that his boy was in the tub and that his daughter was on the floor of the bathroom. Then it was both children were on the floor. And then a version was his daughter was put into the tub and the boy was on the floor. Inconsistent.
If he's referencing the very first time he walked in there and he said that the daughter was on the floor, his daughter was on the floor, and his son was in the tub, and then did you clarify with him, was it some other time, or did you understand him to mean that it was right when he walked in?
I don't think I followed up on that.
Okay. So both things could be true then.
In terms of,
Both children could have been in the bathtub.
I don't think he ever said both were in the bathtub.
Well, maybe I wasn't clear. Both children could have been in the bathtub at some point.
Possibly.
He says on the 24th what happens next, right? After he's able to comprehend what has happened, he says what happens next, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what he said?
You have a specific question as like point?
Well, what did they do next?
What they did next is Toledo said that he helped load up his wife because she was heavy into the trunk, that Jackson had got some garbage bags, had put them around the children's heads, that the children got loaded up in the trunk with their mother, that the axe that was used to kill the children was put in the trunk, that Jackson left to dispose of, dispose of the bodies, and that Toledo was assigned to clean up the house.
How long was he gone?
Toledo said Jackson was gone for a few hours.
He later clarified that to 2, right? 2 or about 2?
He said 2, 3, because we asked what a few was, I believe, if
Right.
I recollect the transcript, and it was 2, 3, somewhere in there.
So he was gone for that amount of time, and during that time, Mr. Toledo told you what he was doing.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What was he doing?
Toledo, he was cleaning up the bathroom. I think he said he got some towels, cleaning up some blood, had cleaned up the living room. I believe a table had gotten broken with some glass. And then he said at some point that he was putting his clothes away. Toledo was. Shoes in a box. He waited for Jackson to come back. Jackson came back. A car was hosed down. And then Jackson left again, was one of his versions of events, I believe.
Okay. But on that day, on the 24th interview, is that what he said?
Yes, sir.
So Mr. Jackson had left with the dead bodies, and Mr. Toledo stayed home and cleaned.
Yes, sir.
Do you dispute the fact? Well, let me ask you a question. When were these people killed?
I'd say between 1 a.m. and 5:30.
You don't know when.
You asked me, and to speculate,
No, I'm asking you a question. When were they killed?
when were they killed? Sometime between 1 and 5:30.
Was it at 1?
No, sir. Because at 1:03, she finished the phone call.
Okay, so was it at 1:05?
I don't know, sir.
Was it at 1:30?
I don't know, sir.
Was it at 2?
No, sir, I was not there.
Was it at 3?
Again, sir, I don't know. I was not there.
You've said that you don't think that Mr. Jackson was in the house.
Yes, sir.
Does that mean you don't think Mr. Jackson killed the kids?
Yes, sir.
Who killed the kids?
Louis Toledo.
Do you have There was some talking yesterday, I believe you were asked some questions about a story concerning Mr. Toledo throwing clothes off a bridge.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Just for my benefit, could you explain what that was?
Toledo had said that after he dropped off Ty Jackson at the 7-Eleven, that he thought that Ty, I guess, was going to turn on. He was acting suspicious. So Louis had gone back to Lake Mary. He had gotten Yesenia's car from the parking lot of the Publix, had gone to his brother's house, Chris DeSanta. When his brother didn't want to help, then Louis had taken the car back to the Publix in Lake Mary, put it in the exact same spot that they had left it, and then Louis drove back to Deltona using the 1792 roadway, and as he crossed the 1792 bridge, he disrobed for the second time and took those clothes and threw them out the window.
What time of day do you make that to be?
Jackson showed up on tape at 7-Eleven at 8:08, so it had to be between 8 and 9:43 in the morning when deputies arrived at the Covent Garden house.
Did you ever go to that bridge?
No, sir, I did not.
You know the bridge.
Yes, sir, I do.
People aren't from here, so I'm just going to ask you a couple questions about it, okay?
Sure.
Or we're not from. So on the bridge, did you clarify with him where he did that?
No, sir.
Did you clarify with him if he was at the bridge or on the bridge?
No, sir.
So yesterday when you were asked, that's a major commuting way, people would have, it inferred people would have seen it, didn't it?
Yes, sir.
But you didn't clarify with anybody where that even happened. It was just at the bridge, right?
Yes, sir.
So you don't know if he was standing out in the open in the middle of the street, taking his clothes off and throwing them over a bridge, or if he was at the bridge off to the side where he couldn't be seen, throwing clothes off, if that even happened.
If it even happened?
If it even happened.
Well, he's saying it happened.
Yeah, but there's stuff you say you believe, and then there's stuff you say you don't necessarily believe, and he says all of it. So when I'm asking you, well, I'll ask you, do you believe that happened?
That he made a second trip?
That he went to that bridge and took all of his clothes off and threw them in the water?
That's a possibility.
Realize it's a possibility. I asked you if you believe that happened.
Yes, sir.
So you believe that happened, that he went there, took off his clothes, and threw them in the water, but you never went there.
Yes, sir.
You never clarified where it is he did it so that you could see those clothes.
Yes, sir.
You never went there to find out if it really happened because you just never went there, right?
Correct.
Do you remember in the statement on the 24th that when Mr. Toledo referred to Mr. Jackson using the PlayStation, do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember that he said that Mr. Jackson had a rag in his hand?
When he grabbed the PlayStation?
That when they were cleaning up that he had a rag in his hand, that he was wiping stuff off?
Yes, sir.
Some of the testimony you gave yesterday, I got, if I'm wrong, you tell me, okay? I got the impression that you disputed Mr. Toledo's recollection of times. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember in the statement that Mr. Toledo said that he can't be accurate with the times? He told you that right up front?
At one point of his interview, yes, sir.
Yesterday you said that you didn't know of or were not aware of any time that Mr. Toledo had recounted that his wife made some kind of swearing oath on her kids. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, sir.
You're not the only person that interviewed Mr. Toledo, are you?
That's correct.
Who is Kelly Hill?
She used to be a crime scene investigator for the Volusia County Sheriff's Office.
Do you know who that is?
Yes, sir.
At the time, was she with the Volusia County Sheriff?
Yes, sir.
You're aware that she interviewed Mr. Toledo
Yes, sir.
on the 28th of October?
Yes, sir.
The interview you referenced yesterday was in November, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that he told Ms. Hill, or Deputy, was it Deputy Hill? Would it be Deputy Hill?
Deputy Hill.
Okay. Are you aware that he told Deputy Hill, I said, could you swear to me when you went to Alabama you didn't sleep with nobody? She said, meaning his wife, she said, I swear to you, and I swear to you. And I said, will you swear to your kids on that you love me? And she said, yeah, I swear on my kids. You just weren't aware of that statement?
I was not aware. No, sir.
Yesterday you weren't aware of it?
No, sir.
Were you present in an interview on the 28th of October? Were you at that interview?
Which one?
28th of October?
Yes, sir. I was not present for that. No, sir.
You weren't the main interviewer, but you were in the vicinity?
Yes, sir.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, because there's a couple interviews I think you said on the 28th. Maybe at different places. I'm not sure which.
One on the 29th, and then there's one on the 28th.
And that took place at the Operations Center?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was at the Operations Center. Yes, sir.
Okay. During this interview? You just weren't in the interview. You weren't the one interviewing.
Yes, sir.
Right? Are you aware of the statement he made? She's like, no, I swear. I said, swear to me on everything you love, which is your kids, that you haven't slept with anybody else. She goes, I swear on my kids. You just weren't aware that that statement was made when you said you hadn't heard it yesterday?
Correct.
There was some kind of question asked to you yesterday about whether or not you were going to, or there was, I'm sorry I'm being inarticulate about it, but there was some kind of question yesterday about whether or not these two were working out their problems and maybe getting back together that day. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
It was inferred, I think, from the question, you correct me if I'm wrong, that based on what was being said and what was happening, that wasn't going to happen. Is that correct? That they weren't going to get back together?
I'm not really, if I'm understanding the question.
Do you remember the question you were asked yesterday?
Was it about the preacher?
No.
Pastor?
Well, they were seeing the preacher, right? You knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, no, about the wedding ring. Do you remember?
Oh, yes, sir.
And that she'd put her wedding ring back on?
Yes, sir.
And that she had said that she wanted to get back together?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yesterday when you were asked the question by the prosecutor, that obviously wasn't going to happen, or words to like effect. Do you remember that question?
No, I think it was a question was an inconsistency. Did he mention something like that to you? And I had said that I wasn't aware of him mentioning that to me.
Okay. So you weren't aware that she had put her wedding ring back on?
The statement that Toledo had made on the 3rd, I was not aware of before the 3rd.
I got you. So in the same interview with Kelly Hill, if he had said, I went upstairs and I asked her, and she said, she goes, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing? And I said, I'm on break. And I said, let me ask you a question. She said, what? And I said, can you look at me in the eye and swear to me, because that morning, it's crazy, I don't know, it's weird, because that morning she comes back, she comes to the bathroom, and she goes, look, I'm wearing my ring again. And I said, why are you wearing your ring again? And she said, because you're doing everything I didn't think you was going to do. You weren't aware that he had said that to Kelly Hill?
No, sir.
And in the interview on the 28th, that you weren't the interviewer, but you were in the operations center?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware he said, referring to his wife, she's like, look, I'm wearing my ring. You know things are good for us now. And I really like the way things are going with us. I really want to keep it that way. You know, I really want to continue to do things the way we've been doing it. You weren't aware that statement was made?
No, sir.
So yesterday when you were asked those questions, you weren't saying he never said it. You're saying you didn't know.
Yes, sir.
Did you say that you had interviewed Tyshawn Jackson?
Yes, sir.
When you interviewed Tyshawn Jackson, what day was that?
October 24th.
October 24th?
24th, yes, sir.
Same day as the one we watched.
Same day with Toledo. Yes, sir.
Were you aware that Mr. Jackson, when first approached by deputy and Ms. Suarez, the mom of the deceased, were you aware that he told them that he didn't know where Luis Toledo was?
No, sir.
When he was first approached that morning, you weren't aware that he had said to the police, no, I don't know, I hadn't seen him?
I'm not sure what he told the police then, sir.
Were you aware when you interviewed Mr. Jackson that Mr. Jackson's mother had told him not to speak to anybody?
No, sir.
Were you aware that Mr. Jackson was on probation?
Yes, sir. I believe so.
Were you aware on the day you interviewed Mr. Jackson that he called the police back to his house or had his mother do it?
I was aware that he had told police about Yesenia's car, and then subsequently had said some things about where items of evidence could be located.
I just want to go through this with you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Bear with me. Were you aware when you interviewed him that he had initially told everybody he didn't know anything about Mr. Toledo and that he sent his mother out to have the detectives come back so he could give more information? Did you know that?
Sir, I don't know. I don't recall.
When you interviewed him, you didn't know that?
I don't know if I know that specific piece of information.
All right. Do you know that 2 detectives went to interview him?
On which day?
On the 23rd?
Yes, sir.
At his house? In his kitchen with his mom?
I know that they took him to places. Specifically, this interview in the kitchen, I don't know if it took place there. I did not ask that question.
Do you know that the story he told that time was that he had just helped move the car and they came straight back?
Sir, I don't know.
You don't know that he did that?
No, I don't know.
You don't know if he did that or not?
If he said that's all he said?
Mm-hmm.
Again, what I do know, and I'm 100% on, is that he had said about where the car was and then where...
I'm just talking about how we got there.
Yes, sir. The specifics on how we got there, I don't recall.
All right. And then do you know that he went to school that day after he told the police that all he did was help Mr. Toledo move the car and come straight home? Did you know that?
At the time of the 24th?
No. Yeah. Did you know that? That's what he said?
No, sir, not that I recall.
Do you know that he went to school?
That he went to school that day or
Yeah,
that?
right after he talked to the police. Do you know he did that?
Sir, not that I recall.
Okay. Do you know that when he came back, he said that he had even more information then? Because he remembered more?
Did I know that? Yeah, I know that.
this was at least his third contact with the police, and then he said he remembered more. Do you remember that? Do you know that's what he said?
I don't know how many contacts he had.
All right. Do you know that he got in the car and went with the police and showed them basically all these landmarks?
Yes, sir, I do know that.
Do you know what landmarks he showed them?
Landmarks in terms of where evidence was found?
He got in the car for a reason. Do you know why he got in the car?
To show investigators where pieces of evidence could be found.
So I'm calling those landmarks, okay?
Okay.
So do you know what landmarks he found?
Yes, sir.
What landmarks?
A dumpster at an apartment complex where items of evidence were found that were pertinent to the case.
Do you know what Mr. Jackson said that Mr. Toledo said
What day?
on that car ride?
Something about Mr. Toledo said that he snapped?
Okay. Did Mr. Jackson convey to you any other conversation other than he snapped?
Conveyed to other investigators on the
To you.
23rd? To me?
You're interviewing him, right? Did
On
he
the
tell you?
24th? Yes, sir. I'm making sure we're keeping our days sequential
Yeah.
here because we're jumping all over the page.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm talking about what he did on the 23rd, but you interviewed him on the 24th. So I'm talking about your interview on the 24th. That takes us back a day.
Yes, sir.
I'm not jumping. I'm talking about what he talked about, okay?
Yes, sir.
So I just make sure we're on the same page, okay?
Yes, sir.
So at this point, did he told you that Mr. Toledo said he snapped?
I don't recall on the 24th.
When you interviewed him, did he tell you that you said they went to a dumpster?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Well, now, I knew that they had gone to a dumpster. I don't know if on the 24th, if we specifically got into that.
Okay. Were you told that Mr. Jackson said what Mr. Toledo was wearing
Yes, sir.
on the 23rd?
Yes, sir.
Do you know what that was?
Mr. Toledo was wearing?
Yeah. They went to the car. They went to take the car, right?
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Jackson and Mr. Toledo went to
Yes,
take
sir.
the car. And Mr. Jackson described what Mr. Toledo was wearing, didn't he?
I'm going to have to go back. I don't recall on my answer for that. I don't know. I don't remember at this point if Jackson had told me or told somebody else what Toledo was wearing.
All right. Do you know from any of your interviews that Mr. Jackson gave a description of what Mr. Toledo was wearing? From any of the interviews, the whole time?
Not that I can recall.
All right. The day that, I'm talking about the 26th now, which was the last interview we showed yesterday, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You've reviewed that tape, right?
Yes, sir.
You gave testimony about, what happened that day in the bathroom, right?
Yes, sir.
Even though you weren't in here for the recording, you're the main questioner again on that recording, right?
I'd say it was myself and Sergeant Sheps.
You
Kind of
think
equal.
it was even?
It was kind of equal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were in there with him during that time?
At points, yes, sir.
Yeah, and when you were there, that was because he asked you, he wanted to speak to you again, right?
Yes, sir.
You didn't go haul him out of there and start questioning him again. He wanted to speak to you, right?
He asked to see us, yes, sir.
You would describe his demeanor as depressed?
No, I didn't say I was depressed.
I'm asking, would you describe his demeanor as depressed on that interview?
No, sir.
You would not call that depressed?
He seemed like he wanted to give some information. So, I mean, at points of the interview, we talk about the general tone of the interview.
Well, do you remember the interview?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you remember he had his head down the whole time?
No, sir, not the whole time.
Laying on his arm?
No, sir.
Most of the time?
I wouldn't say it was
It
most
says
of
what
the
it
time.
says, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was he as actively speaking to you as he had been in the past?
Yes, sir.
He wasn't giving you one-word answers that you could barely hear?
Depends on the questions I'd asked him.
You think that he was acting the same way he always acted?
From the 23rd, the 24th, the 25th, the 26th?
Yeah.
I don't know if he was acting the same way on the 23rd. Obviously, the 23rd, he wasn't showing any kind of depression or...
But I'm asking about the 26th now. So everything's all out on the table.
Sure.
He's there talking to you again, and you believe he wasn't depressed?
I don't know what his emotion was.
Okay. Later on, he goes into the bathroom and slams the door. I'm talking about the third trip, I guess, to the bathroom.
Yes, sir.
He slams the door, and nobody can get in.
Correct.
When you're one of the ones that helped get in the door, right?
I wasn't one of the persons that kicked the door, rammed the door. I was the taser guy.
So you were getting in however you could get into the bathroom, right?
However they got in, yes, sir.
You're the taser guy.
Yes, sir.
All right. So how'd you do that?
How did I deploy the taser?
Yeah.
Very simplistic. I aimed the taser at Toledo, and I told him to stop trying to hurt himself, and I pulled the trigger of the taser.
Was the door open?
The door to the bathroom, no, sir. It was an actual hole that had got punched through the door, so the door wasn't open. I would say that it was a man-made hole that was not intended for people to walk through, and that's how I looked through the hole with the taser and deployed the taser.
How big was the hole?
Big enough for me to...
Show me.
Probably that big. Again, enough for me to kind of peek my head in and point the taser just enough to clear the door. Again, we're talking tight spaces here,
Yeah.
so it was enough to get it through and deploy the taser.
I don't know, but you made it sound like you just walked up and tasered him. That's not what happened at all. I mean,
No, sir, I don't
the hole
think I
in the
said I
door-
walked up and tasered him. I was pretty clear that my cohorts had to punch a hole through the door with
Yeah.
a ram, and then I had to...
There was some effort involved in this, right?
There's some effort.
It's a little hole, right?
Yes, sir, well, your hands are bigger there, so it's like this. It's not like that.
Okay.
It's a little bit smaller.
Okay, I just want to make sure we understood what was going on.
Yes, sir.
We need
All
to
right.
find a time for a break.
I'm going to be done very
Okay,
soon.
go ahead.
At this point, was he leaning against the door? Is that what happened?
His back was up against the door. Yes, sir.
So nobody could push him forward until there were holes in the door, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Once you tasered him, did he fall sideways or something so you all could open the door? Is that what happened?
Yes, sir. He fell kind of forward. Yeah, he fell forward, and then investigator 4, I believe, was able to push the door open enough to get him out.
Okay. And when you got him out, he was screaming, "Let me die"?
I believe so, sir.
May I have just a moment?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Ron. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take about a 15-minute break. The jurors have asked, before we do that, the jurors have asked about scheduling. So I'd like to discuss this with you guys before I answer their question about scheduling. So when you come back, I'm going to give you a heads up, okay? Won't talk about the case, all right?
All right.
That suggests otherwise?
Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that the circumstantial evidence in this case points to Luis Toledo killing his kids?
Sustained. Please do not lead.
Sure. Which direction does the circumstantial evidence point in this case?
It points that Luis Toledo is the person that killed everybody.
A little while ago, you were asked if the defendant was cooperative with law enforcement. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall answering yes?
Yes, sir.
Does your definition of cooperative include lies?
Objection, Your Honor. That's the prosecutor testifying. I need to, okay?
Investigator, I'll return to my question. Does your definition of cooperative include lies?
Yes, sir.
Persons cooperative when they lie to your face?
Well, cooperative meaning that if I'm asking them questions and they continue to talk, that's my version of cooperative. If they say something, I use the adage that a lie is just as good as the truth. So that's my version of cooperation.
But when we're analyzing whether a person is cooperative, what is it that you mean when you say, yes, he was cooperative, if he lied to your face?
Well, I was asking questions, and he was answering those questions. He didn't hesitate to answer the questions. So he was cooperating in my investigation in terms of my interview.
So cooperative to you then is just whether he continues
Yes, sir.
speaking. If you ask him a question, he answers the question,
Yes, sir.
independent of the truth of the answer.
Yes, sir.
You interviewed the defendant on October 23rd, October 24th, October 26th. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Did the defendant lie to you on October 23rd?
Yes, sir.
Did you find discrepancies in his other statements?
Yes, sir.
Did you find inconsistencies both with the statement and with the evidence?
Yes, sir.
Did the defendant tell you during one of his interviews that he couldn't provide a reliable account of the time that things transpired or took place?
I'm not sure he said the words reliable. He said he was off maybe on some times.
Okay, he was off on times.
Yes, sir.
Is there any reason in your mind that he should be given a pass as to what times things occurred?
No, sir.
Were other witnesses in this case interviewed by you and held to strict standards about what times things happened?
Yes, sir.
And were those times checked against the other evidence in the case?
Yes, sir.
When you looked at what the defendant said about times that things occurred, what did you find?
Inaccuracies.
Okay. Inaccuracies as to what?
As to when he first saw Tyshawn Jackson, as to how long Tyshawn Jackson was gone and had come back during the cleanup process, when he went and visited his brother, even when he said he dropped off Tyshawn Jackson at the 7-Eleven, inconsistent.
The defendant says that he saw his brother after he dropped off Tyshawn Jackson. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
If the contact with his brother actually occurred between 5 and 5:30 a.m. that same morning, is there any way that the defendant could have been cleaning his house as he told you?
No, sir.
As the defense questioned you a moment ago, they talked with you about where statements began to break down. There were some statements about the cemetery. Do you recall that Louis Toledo went to a cemetery?
Beyond what he said? No, sir.
Is there any way to prove or disprove that he was there?
No, sir.
Do you have any idea where he was after he left Felicia Perez's house on the night of October 22nd around 6:30 in the evening?
No, sir.
If he told you that he went to the cemetery sometime that night, do you have any way to prove whether that's true or that's a lie?
No, sir.
He told you at one point that he went home and started packing and ate dinner and waited for his wife to arrive. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. He said he went home and ate a plate of food. I don't know about the packing part, but I do recall the eating part.
Okay. When he told you that, did he make it seem like he left Felicia Perez's house and went straight home?
Yes, sir.
If that were true, is there any reason for his wife to be sending him text messages for 2.5 hours after leaving her mother's house?
No, sir.
If they're sitting in the same room, there's no need to text, right?
Correct.
There's no need to call?
No, sir.
As it relates to the activity that evening after 6:30 p.m., who is the only person that you had to rely upon to create a timeline or understand what may have happened?
Louis Toledo.
Is all the information from 6:30 in the evening until 5 o'clock the next morning based upon what Louis Toledo says?
Yes, sir.
During those hours, are there times that you can point out or disprove, or point out inconsistencies or disprove things that he's told you occurred?
Yes, sir.
Are there other things that you just have to accept as truth because there's no way to prove or disprove anything?
Yes, sir.
What time did Louis Toledo first tell police that he saw Tyshawn?
October 22nd.
And he made that statement on October 23rd, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What other time did he say on that same day that he had seen Tyshawn Jackson?
1 a.m., October 23rd.
Was he asked specifically during that interview whether he saw Tyshawn Jackson at 3 a.m.?
No, sir.
He was not?
He may have been, sir. Do you have,
Do you have your first transcript there from the 23rd?
yes, sir.
Okay, I'd like you to look at page 75 and read it to yourself. And I'd like, actually start on page 74. Read pages 74 and 75. 74 and 75.
Okay, sir.
Do you recall now that there was a discussion about 3 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did the defendant deny seeing Tyshawn Jackson at 3 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
What times did he say that he saw him?
He said around 1 a.m.
Did his statement later change in the interview on the 24th?
Yes, sir.
And on the 24th, it's when he said what?
That he saw him at 3 a.m.
What are all the ways that he's said over the course of his interviews with you that he saw Tyshawn Jackson?
He said he saw Tyshawn Jackson outside around 1 a.m.-ish. And then he said he saw Tyshawn Jackson at 3 a.m. when he pulled into a driveway. Then he said he saw Tyshawn Jackson at 3 when he came out of the house. Then he said he saw him one time with a flashlight at 3 a.m. Then he said he saw Tyshawn with Mr. Biggs, which is Tyshawn's dog.
Did he offer you any explanation as to why or his statement evolved?
No, sir.
A little while ago, you were asked about the PlayStation. Do you recall that conversation with the defense attorney?
Yes, sir.
Who told you that Tyshawn Jackson's fingerprints ought to be on the PlayStation?
Louis Toledo.
Who told you that he was the person responsible for cleaning the house?
Louis Toledo.
So who is it that should know whether or not Tyshawn Jackson's fingerprints are on the PlayStation?
Louis Toledo.
Is it a major detail in this case where Mr. Toledo first, is it a major detail in this case where Louis Toledo saw his children dying in the bathroom?
Yes, sir.
Please explain to us how his statement evolved from the first time he told you until the time that he talked with Sergeant Mejias on 11/3.
The first time, Toledo had said that his son, Elijah, was in the tub, and that his daughter, Talia, was on the floor. Then it evolved to both of the children, where he saw them on the floor of the bathroom, and then it had evolved to his daughter was in a tub, and then the boy was on the floor.
So his first statement was the exact opposite of his last statement.
Yes, sir.
The clothes that went off of the bridge, the 1792 bridge over the river.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about those for a minute. You never personally went out and conducted a search, did you?
No, sir.
Was there a major search effort that was conducted in this particular case to locate either items of evidence or the victims themselves?
Yes, sir.
Did that search effort include Marine units and air units?
Yes, sir.
Did anyone ever locate items of clothing that had been thrown off of that bridge?
No, sir, not that I know of.
During your interview with the defendant and with Tyshawn Jackson, for that matter, did they both give you the impression that the defendant was making active efforts to either clean or dispose of evidence related to this?
Yes, sir.
If throwing the clothes off the bridge occurred the way that the defendant describes, 8 or 9 o'clock, would that mean that he'd be throwing his clothing over a bridge on a major thoroughfare during rush hour?
Yes, sir.
When it comes to conducting interviews in these types of cases, do details matter?
Yes, sir.
Are all of the details checked and rechecked?
Yes, sir.
Are they compared to other items of evidence in the case?
Yes, sir.
Are they compared to other statements of witnesses in the case?
Yes, sir.
Did the defendant's statement, how did the defendant's statement match up when it was compared both to other individuals' testimony and physical evidence in this case?
It matched up in terms of when Toledo says that he took Tyshawn Jackson back to Deltona and dropped him off close to a 7-Eleven.
Is there an alignment between Tyshawn Jackson's statement and Louis Toledo's statement as it relates to the window between 6:11 and 8 o'clock or 8:15 on the morning of October 23rd?
Yes, sir.
Is there a dispute with every other piece of evidence that the defendant offers?
Yes, sir.
I want to move ahead to October 26th. You were asked if the defendant seemed depressed during the interview.
Yes, sir.
Is there a reason that a person in the defendant's position on October 26, 2013 might want to commit suicide other than depression?
Yes, sir.
So if I understood you correctly, you said details matter, details checked and rechecked. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Then you just said that if Mr. Toledo threw his clothes over the bridge, it would be on a major thoroughfare.
Yes, sir.
But you didn't check those details. You don't know where he did it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you do?
Oh, no, you're asking me, did we check those? And then, as was answered the first time, past time, there was an active search by members, Marines, Marine unit, aviation, ground
the clothes.
search. For clothes. Oh, for that general area. That area was searched not only for that.
Listen to my question,
Yes, sir.
okay?
Yes, sir.
I asked you before, because this is now in response to this question,
Okay.
if he had thrown those clothes off that bridge,
Yes, sir.
it would be on a major thoroughfare. You just told me that you don't know where he threw those clothes off. You don't know if he was at the bridge, right?
Right.
Or on the bridge, right?
Right.
You don't know if he was on the side of the road where the bridge is. You don't know that, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you do know that?
No, he asked me about if it's a major thoroughfare.
You did. But you didn't check those details.
I did
If
not.
he did it that way, he'd be, I think my question before was, you don't know if he was standing in the highway taking his clothes off and throwing them over the bridge, or if he was someplace else at the bridge.
Correct.
Okay. You were just asked, is it a major detail that Mr. Toledo saw his children dying in the bathroom? Is that a major detail to you?
Yes, sir.
You already said to me that you don't know what time that happened.
That is correct.
How did they die?
Louis Toledo said that they were struck in the head with an axe multiple times.
Who did it?
Tyshawn Jackson, that's what he says. But he's been inconsistent also with what he said throughout my interviews.
Has he ever said that Tyshawn Jackson didn't kill his kids?
No, sir.
Has he ever said that he did?
No, sir.
So when I asked you before, how did they die?
Louis Toledo said they were struck in the head.
I'm asking you how they died.
Again, I was not there, but the person who was there.
To narrow down this extraction of the phone and present a report of it that was just more specific in nature. That we were looking for just the text messages between the defendant and his wife at the time.
And now, did you search those records by the name Louis Toledo, or did you search them by phone number 321-696-5859?
Well, we go by the phone number because of the fact that if anybody here in the jury texts me, I could have you listed as Susie or Bay or Sweetheart or whatever like that. So that doesn't necessarily identify the person. The phone number is the identifying factor, and that's what we end up narrowing the search by.
So you did that in this case, though?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And after narrowing the data to just Jasinia's, what did you do?
I then generated a PDF type of report that is easy to be able to provide to the state, so they can have a transcript of the back and forth text message that was done between the two of them.
Okay. And did you also provide a copy to your partners in the major case unit at the Coast County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, and primarily Investigator Ford at the time.
May I approach the witness? I'll approach with what's been marked 3 J's for state's identification purposes. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that the sorted phone record that you've been talking about for the last little while?
Yes, this is the one that we helped narrow down all the other superfluous stuff that to get down to just the specific text messages you were looking for.
Judge, if there are no objections, to 3 J's and evidence of state's next.
Okay. You say on that disc, as well as have another objection, I think, to the next exhibit. Now. Okay. What were the objections?
Now, the disc we just entered and just talked about, sir, is just the sorted record between the defendant and the victim. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's with respect to a particular time frame that you were asked to gather this information?
Yes.
Okay. And when we look at the items that have been placed on that disc, are we going to see the text conversations between Yesenia Suarez and Louis Toledo from October 13th, 2013 until the morning of October 23rd, 2013?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Any cross-examination?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You said that with that software device you have, is that just for law enforcement, or can anyone buy that?
Well, no, I think anyone can buy it as long as you have a license, and it's a relatively expensive software. But yes, there are people that are in the private sector, private investigators and things of that nature that have access to that software.
Are there other ones out there available for law enforcement to buy, or is there only the one program?
For like mobile phone extractions and
Yes.
stuff, there's a variety of different softwares that are out there.
All right. And you said that from your training and experience, these products that law enforcement can buy are so sophisticated they can actually retrieve texts that have been deleted from the phone itself?
Well, a lot of times, depending, there's certain variables that are involved, but yes, quite often it can.
And so I guess the other side of that coin is that sometimes you can't retrieve a deleted text. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
I don't have any other questions.
Can you redirect? No, sir. Would it be excused? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Call your next question. May we approach, Your Honor? May we approach?
The state calls Brian Ford. Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Ford, over the last couple of days, we've heard from Keith Ernie and Casey Gallagher as it relates to telephones, and that's kind of what I want to start by talking with you about this morning.
Sure.
In this particular case, were there individual searches done with respect to the phones of persons related to the investigation? Thank you. Sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Primarily, did law enforcement make an effort to gather the phone records of Luis Toledo, Kevin Dredden, Tyshawn Jackson, and Yesenia Suarez?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As it relates to Luis Toledo, what effort was made to gather his telephone or telephone records?
Well, we weren't able to locate his phone to do a physical dump on it, so we subpoenaed his phone records to obtain those.
Okay. And when you say do a physical dump, are you talking about the extraction that was described by both Mr. Ernie and Mr. Gallagher?
That's correct. Physical dump is a slang we use.
Okay. And you said that you did what to obtain the defendant's telephone records?
Subpoenaed his phone records from his provider.
Okay. Now, as it relates to information that you can gather from the provider, what do you obtain from the company when you send out such a subpoena?
Primarily call logs, as far as phone numbers called, the date, the time. Generally speaking, you don't get. You'll see when a text message was sent, but you won't see content of a text message.
So we're talking about primarily transmissions.
Correct.
Is it the corporate records that relates to those transmissions that you get?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you also get, or can you ask for, tower and GPS data associated with the telephone?
Yes, you can.
Okay. And through that information, can you determine where a person's phone is at a particular point in time?
You get a general vicinity. Okay. Yes.
And can you also determine whether a person's phone has been turned off from the records that you receive as it relates to this GPS and tower data?
You can.
In addition to the cellular records that you got for the defendant, how many other cellular records did you request from a corporation?
I believe we got them all for Yesenia, Kevin Dredden, and Tyshawn Jackson.
Okay. Same questions as I asked you before. Can you tell transmission but not content?
Correct.
Can you also tell some information about location?
Correct.
Can you tell some information about whether a phone was turned off or not?
You can, yes.
Now, as it relates to the home phone of Mr. Toledo and Ms. Suarez, what efforts were made to gather the communication through that device?
Same thing we did with for the cellular devices. We requested the phone records from their provider.
Okay. And what information do you receive in return?
Similar information, days and times that calls go out and the numbers dialed.
But with a home device, is there any text message or content?
Not text message, no.
Okay. Is there any tower information or geolocation information?
No, sir.
So we're only looking at the transmission records for incoming and outgoing calls?
Correct.
And you made such a request as it relates to 317 Covent Gardens Place on or about the time of this investigation and the events described therein?
That is correct.
Did you also receive information from the corporate records of Gizmo Quip, essentially SMS tracker, as it relates to the telephone of Yesenia Suarez?
Yes, sir.
And during your review of those records, what information were you able to receive or review? And I'm not asking for specifics at this point.
Content of text messages, of text conversations.
So you could actually see content in those records?
That's correct.
Unlike the phone, the stuff that the phone companies provided, SMS Tracker and Gizmo Quip, they provide the content of the conversation.
Yes, sir, they were.
Yesterday, that he received some phones from individuals within the major case unit, either you or your partners. Were those the phones of Kevin Dredden, Ty Jackson, and Yesenia Suarez?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were all of those devices submitted for forensic extraction?
They were.
And were all of those devices returned to you with reports of that extraction?
That is correct.
In the extraction reports, what kind of information are you able to see as it relates to the phones of these three individuals?
That's like Investigator Ernie was describing. There's a ton of information on cell phones. That's one of the reasons we try and go for them immediately. We look at phone calls, call logs, contacts, text messages. You can usually get content of text messages, photos, websites that have been browsed. There's pretty much anything you do on your phone we could see.
And as it relates to the extraction conducted for the phone of Kevin Dredden, was that extraction performed on October 24th, 2013?
That sounds right.
And as it relates to the extraction for the phone of Tyshawn Jackson, was that extraction performed on October 24th, 2013?
That one was, yes.
Okay. And as it relates to the extraction performed on the device for Yesenia Suarez, was that extraction performed on October 23rd, 2013?
Yes, it was.
After you had the extraction completed by members of the Volusia County Sheriff's Office and the forensic unit, and you had the cellular records that were given to you by the various corporations hosting.
Once we had more information as far as days and times, and a little bit more background, we're able to kind of compile everything together to put together a text chain of events, or a chain of events for a certain time period. It's easier to read instead of us trying to manually go through and pick out the text messages.
Were you able to cross-examine this, or were you able to cross-reference, the cellular records against the extraction reports?
Yes.
Were you able to look for similarities and differences?
Yes.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes.
Okay. As Investigator Ernie and Investigator Gallagher have already testified, it is physically possible to receive messages that have been deleted during the extraction, or prior to the extraction, you get it back when you extract the information. Were you able to see any messages that were in fact deleted by individuals, either Tyshawn Jackson, Jasenia Suarez, or Kevin Dredden?
Through the extraction?
Yes, sir.
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't recall. I know some messages were deleted. I just don't recall if we were able to get them back from the extraction.
If you were able to get them back through the extraction, would you have compiled them with the rest of the information that
Yes.
you've already testified about?
Yes.
During the course of your investigation over the last 4 years, were you able to assemble summary charts of the phones that we've been talking about here this morning?
Yes, sir.
The house phone of 317 Covent Gardens that relates to telephone number 386-259-9889.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The cellular records of Louis Toledo at cell phone number 321-696-5859.
Yes, sir.
The cellular records of Jasenia Suarez at phone number 321-262-5915.
Yes, sir.
The cellular records of Tyshawn Jackson at 386-960-3604.
Yes, sir.
In addition to those, were you able to compile summaries that would show these isolated conversations occurring between particular individuals?
Yes, sir.
Namely, conversations that occurred between Jasenia Suarez and Kevin Dredden,
Yes, sir.
Jasenia Suarez and Luis Toledo,
Yes, sir.
the phone summary of all events for Tyshawn Jackson on October 22nd and 23rd.
Yes, sir.
The phone summary as it relates to the house at Covent Gardens,
Yes, sir.
and all of the cellular records of Kevin Dredden on October 22nd and October 23rd.
Yes, sir.
In creating those conversations or those summary charts, did you also reference the corporate records that were received from SMS Tracker and what they captured?
Yes, sir, I did.
Sir, I'm showing you what's been marked as ZZ. What do you recognize that item to be?
This is the extraction report for Kevin Dredden.
I'm showing you what's been marked with triple H. What do you recognize that item to be?
The extraction report for Tyshawn Jackson.
Showing you what's been marked as triple I. What do you recognize that exhibit to be?
The extraction report for Jasenia Suarez.
Showing you what's been marked as triple N, 1 and 2. What do you recognize those two items to be?
The cell phone records for Tyshawn Jackson and the certification letter from his cell phone provider.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit MMM, 3 M's, 1 and 2.
This is cellular records for Jasenia Suarez along with her certification letter from her provider.
Showing you 3 Ks, 1 and 2.
So cellular records for Louis Toledo along with the certification letter for his provider.
Showing you what's been marked as 3 Ls, 1 and 2.
This is the landline phone records for 317 Covent Gardens Place and the certification letter for the provider.
Showing you what's been marked with 6 Os, 1 and 2.
This is the summary of all the information that we obtained and put into easier-to-read format.
Judge, subject to the defense's prior objection, the state would move all previously named items into evidence. The state's next.
Any
Objection. I need to see something, please. Judge, to the disc that the state just previously announced, as well as the corporate records, will just lodge our general objection that we're going to maintain it alone. It will be admitted.
Okay, I believe Mr. Nielsen also has a specific objection to 6 O's.
Okay, I didn't know you showed him that.
Yes, I did. Sorry.
Judge, the defense does have an objection to documents in the proposed evidence of 6 O's.
I don't know what that is. Is that the summary?
Yes, sir. My approach, or should...
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Folks, I got a little bit of homework to do, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to release you for lunch at this time and have you come back at 1:30. Don't discuss the case with anyone. Don't do any research, okay? We'll see you back at 1:30.
All right.
Counsel, we'll remain in session.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. If you give me 1 second while I look up
Yes, sir.
what we discussed. The rule. Over the objection, I'm going to go ahead and admit the summaries. I think the statute provides for whenever there's validity, the court has the authority to allow a summary to be utilized by the jury, as long as a competent witness explains those records. So over the objection, the records will be admitted into evidence. We'll do that in
Thank you.
front of the jury when they come back.
Okay.
We will take our lunch hour at this time. okay?
One other point of order, Judge, and I forgot to mention this yesterday. The 11-3 transcripts are still in the possession of the jurors. They need to be collected and delivered back to us. I forgot to address this yesterday afternoon.
Okay. Can you collect the transcripts off of the chairs, please?
Did we have numbers for those exhibits that have just been